but here to comment directly on the verdict of the Zahau family's demands on that the investigation be reopened is Sheriff Bill Gore. Good morning. Nice to have you here.
Thanks,
morning,
Carlos.
Your comment basically said that you looked into this. Now, this happened 7 years ago.
Right.
And that you saw what you saw, and your investigators did their job. But now, in the second statement, you said you're open to discussing. Tell me about that.
Sure. Well, first of all, there's so much tragedy here. I feel for the Zahau family. They've lost a daughter, a sister. It's tragic. Jonah Shacknai lost his little son Max in a tragic accident, and then his girlfriend. Our investigators, our homicide investigators, came in and I think did as good an investigation as you can conduct, looking at all the physical evidence, doing interviews, and we came out with the conclusion that it was a suicide. We have met with the Zahau family attorneys over the years. If they've had new things that they thought that maybe we missed or we weren't aware of, we've sat down with them, and I will sit down with them. Our investigators will sit down with them again to look at anything new that they've come up with, any new evidence. If there's something that they believe we interpreted the wrong way, we'll sit and talk to them about that. We're not hiding anything here. If you go to our website 7 years later, you can see the 2-hour press conference that we held with the results of our investigation with the medical examiner and answering every question the media had, because we knew this was a very unusual case, high-profile case. I still am open to sitting down with Mr. Greer, the Zahau family, any other attorneys they bring in, and examining something maybe that, like I say, we misinterpreted or a new piece of evidence. The interesting thing to me is there was no real new, and I ran into Mr. Greer just about an hour ago. There was no new evidence. There is no physical evidence, DNA, fingerprints, eyewitness, that ties Adam Shacknai to the death of Rebecca Zahau. Mr. Greer has said that because there's a lack of this evidence, it shows that he cleaned up the crime scene and took away. That's his theory. It's difficult to take away your fingerprints and your DNA while leaving the victim's DNA and fingerprints at a crime scene. But that's his theory. I've been talking about this case for 7 years now because it is so unusual. And I've talked to groups and I say, let's take a step back and just look at this. That I'm going to kill somebody. I might have going to murder somebody, but I want to make it look like a suicide. But I'm going to make it look like the most improbable suicide, so people really think it's a murder. It's completely illogical. So we think we did a good job. We don't have a closed mind. If there's something new that comes up, we'll be more than happy to review it. At one time, I believe the Zahau family asked the California Attorney General to review this case. We had no objection to that. They refused to because there was really nothing to review in their opinion. But that offer still stands. If somebody else wants to take an independent look at what we did, at the forensic evidence, at the medical examiner's report, at our interviews, we're not hiding a thing here. And I understand the pain involved in when somebody, in our opinion, commits suicide. I've had relatives that committed suicide. I've had colleagues that have committed suicide. And you're always looking for an answer of why. You don't want to believe it. There's a certain amount of, could I have done something different to prevent that suicide? So I understand the anguish. I feel for the family. They've gone through hell for 7 years. I understand that.
Well, in this case, though, you said this is the theory that's been presented. 9 people agreed with that theory. So you were in the courtroom. You saw some. Oh, you never went in there?
Nope.
You said you just saw some of it.
I would read the accounts in the media the next day. Our deputies that did testify are not allowed in the courtroom because they were testifying. So I was reading the accounts in the paper the next day.
But were you surprised with the verdict?
I was very surprised with the verdict, just because, in my opinion, there was no new evidence presented. And he presented a theory of how Adam Shacknai committed this, but to looking at it from a criminal standpoint, to charge somebody or to get a conviction, there has to be more than a theory. But having said that, I still want to keep an open mind and agree to meet with Mr. Greer to re-examine some of the evidence. If he thinks maybe we missed something, we misinterpreted something,
But clearly, there's two different levels of threshold here. The legal threshold in a courtroom, where you're trying to convince a jury of evidence that you have created in an environment in a courtroom that was very dramatic and clearly swayed the jury in Mr. Greer's favor. But when you're investigating, as your sheriff's investigators were there, their threshold is to do what?
Well, we're just trying to find out, pardon me, in a completely neutral fashion, what happened. How did she come to be hanging by her neck off that balcony? Was it a murder? We were very skeptical. I was personally very skeptical whether it was a murder. And until the last toxicology report came in, which usually takes 6 to 8 weeks, we were not going to make a decision because my thought was maybe she was completely drugged and somehow this happened was she was unconscious. And then when the toxicology reports came back, there was nothing in her system. We waited till every piece of information in and made the most logical conclusion we could come up with based on the evidence, based on the witnesses, that it was a suicide.
Well, you know, this case, the family has said the entire time, the defendant doesn't have money. This wasn't about money.
Right.
Their entire goal was that they wanted you to reopen this case. The first statement, as Carlos had brought up, you said we stand by our investigation. The second statement release has said, okay, we're going to meet with you. So are you going to meet with the family, and what do you think is going to be the outcome of that?
The first statement, I mean, it was within a matter of hours of each other. We were, I was up in North County at the time when the verdict came out. So our intention all along, and we have in the past already met with, as they came up with what they thought was new evidence, we met with the attorneys for the Zaha family, and we will meet with them again. I just saw Mr. Greer about an hour ago. Said, we're open to meet with you, look at it, see if there's anything new that warrants reopening this investigation. If somebody wants to, like the Department of Justice in California, wants to review that our investigation, I have no problem with that. We are not hiding a thing.
Well, is there anything new? Because you keep referring to the theories, but is there any new evidence that you have seen?
Not that I saw presented and represented in the newspaper accounts and the TV accounts of the trial. I was not in the courtroom every day. No deputy sheriff was. So from what I have seen, I have not seen anything new, but that doesn't mean when we sit down with Mr. Greer, there's something that we missed or that I missed.
Because something doesn't sit well with this case. Obviously, I mean, I know that the ramifications, the legal parameters that Carlos mentioned, they are lower in a civil case. But 9 people agreed to this theory for a reason.
Absolutely.
Something is not sitting well.
9 out of 12 people agreed with the fact that Adam Shacknai had something to do or was responsible for Rebecca Zaha's death. So they bought into the plaintiff's theory that Adam was able to wipe all physical evidence out of the crime scene. So,
well, it'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward. The sheriff, as you said, you are the sheriff. We'll be meeting with the Zaha family, and we'll look forward to hearing what comes out of those meetings and what discussions happen. The punitive damages case will be today. But again, we appreciate you being here to clear up that side of the story, and appreciate you very much for being here this morning. All right, we'll be right back with more Good Morning San Diego in just a moment.